Hey guys, and welcome back to the SEL. Today we're finally getting around to my 100 subscriber video. I'm sorry it took so long. I've just been super busy, but I finally have a chance to do it tonight. So tonight we're going to be talking about my grandfather's train that you may have seen in my I drove a train kinda video. And this is my grandfather, Papa Dave, and we're going to talk about the train tonight.
Well, hey y'all, it's a pleasure for me to get with Clay tonight and kind of kick around the Santa Fe and the beginning and the present status of where it's at. So let's go. Let's talk about it a little bit.
All right, let's get started.
This stems back to 2006, which was probably in the summertime, because at that time we were talking about building a what do you call it? Not a a
Roundhouse or something like that.
pool house, not a pool house, the bath house for the pool. Okay, just for bathing suit changes and stuff like that. So we were going to say, well, shoot, why don't we just get us a caboose? So, and we had seen that caboose in Guyton a lot. So that'd be pretty neat to have a caboose out there. So we knew that there was a place between here in Springfield and Waycross, Georgia, that had train stuff all around it, because we always went by it when we went to Moultrie to go to the swap meet.
That Jessup area, or
It's what was the name of it? The little town just before you get to Waycross. It's not Jessup. It's on down further. I don't really remember the little city, but it's a place where they overhaul, from my understanding, train engines down there, and you could see the train paraphernalia over behind their chain link fences and all that stuff over there. But this train, so to speak, which was not there. It was on down the road a ways in like a little pasture. Okay, and we always saw that train sitting in the pasture, which that's not it sitting there. I don't believe it is. It might be. But so we stopped at that place in trying to find a caboose. Well, we saw that engine sitting in the field, so we figured we'd stop and talk to find out who owns that train.
Is it Waycross?
No. So there was a house right by it. So I went up to the house, and there was a lady there, and she said that actually didn't belong to her. It belonged to another gentleman that lived in Waycross. Okay, gave me his name and number and this, that, and the other. So anyway, I said, well, let's call him, he may know where there's a caboose. So I called him, and he actually came and met your grandmother and me at that place, which also was one of those big storage room places, where you could rent for storage. And that's what I think he owned that storage area. And this train actually at one time was being built by the
Shriners Club, right?
The Shriners, I think it's Waycross Shriners or something.
I think it says it on the
and they
side right there.
right, and they did not. I think they built it or tried to build it, and it didn't work out or something. Something didn't work out, because it was originally, it was at one time a switch engine, which I don't know a lot about trains, was a switch engine that they used it, and it ultimately was no longer used anymore. And I think the Shriners might have got it with the intent to build something for parades and stuff. Well, as we went and looked at it, and we said, well, gee, that's pretty neat. And anyway, we said that's not really what we want. We were looking for a caboose because we wanted to build a bathhouse out of a caboose. And he had no information on that whatsoever, because he also was not actually in the train business either. So anyway, we said, well, that's kind of what we're looking for. And But we looked at the train that was sitting in that pasture, and they had taken and put the train on a farm truck frame.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and later I guess they found out it was just too much too much metal for this train to ride around on a truck. I think it was a 1-ton truck or whatever frame. Didn't work, I don't think, to their satisfaction. So I think they abandoned the train, and it sat in that pasture for years because we would see it every time we'd go by it in November. And so anyway, we told them we weren't really looking for a train like that. We were looking for a caboose, and so we continued our journey looking for a caboose around the southern part down that area.
Mm-hmm.
And but when we looked at the train where it was for the first time, it was full of cobwebs and wasp nests, and I think the wheels were almost buried down to the rims in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it had been sitting there for a long, long time. We had to dig out underneath it so we could actually look under there and see what was going on. And we figured we would never, ever would we move that thing. There's no way you can move it. So anyway, at that time, your uncle Shane had a 4-wheel drive. So we said, well, let's just see if we can at least budget. So we hooked the chain to the train and to his truck, which was a 4-wheel drive, big Ford.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, we budged it. We could actually budge it a little bit. I'm not saying we pulled it out at that time, but we felt like, well, we can move this thing. Remember, it's on a truck frame, so it wasn't on train stuff. So we messed with that thing and messed with it, and finally we got it where we could move it. So next thing we said, well, we don't know. So we kind of abandoned it there at the train, me and Mama. And he was telling us about it, and that we told him we weren't really interested in the engine, we were interested in the caboose. And he says, well, there was actually many people stopped to look at this train, and several people wanted to buy it and scrap it, for the metal.
Mm-hmm.
And he, of course, said at that time, no, we're not going to let this thing go to a scrap mill. So he said it's just going to sit. And I said, well, that's really not what we're looking for. So anyway, we looked at it some more, and then we left. He kind of gave us an idea to go down further on our trip. There might be one over in another place. We went over there and looked. But anyway, he called me one day, and I want to say it was a couple of years later. He called me because he still had my phone number.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked me if I was still interested in the engine. Well, I didn't know what he was talking about. I said the engine, because you know as well as I do, I always was tinkering with cars and trucks. I'm thinking, who did I talk to about an engine? And I couldn't put 2 and 2 together. He said, I'm talking about the train down here, and it was Patterson, wasn't it? Is the name of the town? Patterson.
No, that's where it was.
Yeah, in Patterson, where he was at. And he said, why don't you come on back down here and look at it? I said, well, I don't think we can even move that train. I don't think we can move it. He said, well, just come back and look at it, and we'll talk about it. So that's when we decided to take the boys in the truck to, first of all, to see if we could even move it. And we found out we could. So, but he at that time said also that there was a man in California that he had promised to train to. That man was a train collector.
Mm-hmm.
He collected trains and stuff. And he said, I promised it to him, but I haven't heard anything from him. That's when we abandoned the whole idea right there, because there's somebody that already wants it. We don't want it anyway. So we came back, and that's when he called me later and said, come on back down, let's talk about it. And I made him an offer, and he laughed at me. He said, no, I couldn't dare do that. Well, that's the best I'm gonna do because I'm not really that interested in it,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so he thought about it, this, that, and the other, and then again we left, and he called back, said the man, I think he told me the man that had said he wanted to buy it had passed away. We said, well, if we can find somebody to move it. So I called a couple of places to see if they would be interested in transporting that train to Springfield. And without even looking at pictures or anything, they said, no, we can't carry anything that weighs that much. Well, they're not thinking that this thing has already been modified and it's sitting on a truck frame.
Right.
Right. So they're thinking it's still
On the
train track.
right.
No, it ain't like that. It's been modified for parade use, but it didn't work. So anyway, that guy had got out of the picture, and he said, no, I can't move it. And I looked for other people that might have a big tractor trailer and could move that thing. And I talked to a friend that lived close to us, and I told him what we had, and he said, sure, I'll move it.
That was
He drove a lowboy big truck.
right.
And I talked to him, and he said he'd move it. So me and the boys and Marlene went down there, and that's when we moved it. And we actually used Shane's truck to pull that thing up on that trailer. It was a weird looking thing. I don't know if
I'm
we
sure
got
that was
pictures or not of that.
interesting.
But it was sitting on that trailer kind of crooked and everything anyway. And I managed to buy it from him, and he brought it to Springfield. And he unloaded it out here, but it was still so heavy, you couldn't move it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it unloaded in the back here. So every Christmas, we would use the backhoe, wouldn't we? No, it sat back there, and I didn't do anything with it for a while. And when we finished tinkering with it, and I actually got started building it and all, we got it built, and then we'd move it out to the front for Christmas to decorate and all.
Once you
So-
cosmetically fixed it up.
No, not at that time. I think I did it like looking like that one time. And so we decided, well, we're going to make this thing work. Well, Bobby Rush was the man that ran the school bus shop, maintenance shop. And Bobby said, what you need to do is you need to buy a school bus and put that train on a school bus frame. I said, sure, like I can buy a school bus. He said, they're auctioning off a bunch of school buses. Gosh, there must have been, I don't know, 5 or 6 or more than that school buses that the county was auctioning off because they no longer used them.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, I'll go look at them. So I measured the train underneath, and I measured underneath the school buses, where school buses were much longer than this. And I didn't really know a whole lot about what I was talking about. There were only 2 buses out there that were really the short school buses, and that I would even consider, because I didn't want to narrow the frame down
Yeah, that
and
that was
move
a lot
the
of
rear
work.
end and the dry shafts. I didn't want to do all that. But there was 2 buses that would work underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
The back wheels and the front wheels were short enough to fit under this thing, but the frame was still stuck out. So anyway, I said, what the heck? So I told Marlene we were going to buy a school bus, and she said, what? And I said, I'm going to put in a bid. So I put in a bid for a school bus. And Jackie Davis was the lady that worked in the maintenance department's office. She called me because I was working at the school too as a mechanic at the school. And she called me and said, Miss David, you got to come get your bus. I said, what? She said, yep, you won the bid on one of the buses. I said, oh, Lord. So I went up to the school bus and I said, that's the one I bid on. She said, that's the one you got. It's yours. Pay the man. So I had to pay for the bus. Bought the bus, paid for the bus, and drove it home. I didn't have a CDL or nothing. I just drove it home. And I remember went to turn in on I came that way through Springfield, come this way, was going to turn back in that way. And somebody didn't like the way I was driving it. They was blowing the horn at me and everything. I said, I'm about home anyway. So I finally made it home with it. And Marley come out and I could see her now like, that is our school bus. That's it. So the school bus and the train sat out there for a pretty good while until I figured out how in the world we're going to do this thing. So anyway, actually what it did when we started to retrofit, I actually put the train, parked the train between the pole barn and what now is that shop.
Mm-hmm.
And we took and we dug a hole. We got telephone poles, we cut them in half, and dug at each corner of the train, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I buried those poles in the ground, and got some heavy beams that went across pole to pole. And we'd take the backhoe and we lift the train up as much as we could. It wouldn't lift it up off the ground, but it would lift it up.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd stretch it up and we'd put that beam underneath and let it down. Go to the back and do the same thing. So we seesawed it up until it was high enough to where the running gear would come out from under, would drop out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you'll see Eddie's picture in here.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was when we were putting the train down on the school bus frame. But that's how we got the existing frame out from under it. We got under there and we actually had to cut it out with a torch and cut it all out. And drug that stuff out with the tractor. But then we did the bus the same way. So now the train was sitting there on 4 posts up off the ground where you could walk under it almost.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did the bus the same way, but the bus was easier. So the bus body was bolted to the frame. That's
Mm-hmm.
how you used to do it back then. So we unbolted it and did it the same way. And so when we got it up high enough, same way, we got it high enough, we just pulled it out with the tractor. Then it was actually about 4 feet behind the back, 4 feet too long. So we just actually cut it off, and then it would actually be the same length that would go under this here. You got pictures now showing that. And that's the old. This is the old. We'll talk about it. Frame here.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's the farm truck that was under the train. You see the telephone pole there?
Mm-hmm.
There it is. That's what we did. We put a pole in each thing, and then we drug that out from under it, which we're doing it right there. There's the beam going out underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
So we drug that out. That's what was under the train when we bought it. All right? And there's the school bus right here. That's the whole deal right there. I mean, you can't beat the pictures there to show you. And it was in the summertime, you can see. So there's what we had to work with, to start with.
Right.
And I was going to see if it had the old bell sitting back there somewhere. And so there it is. Now, what I found out too is by putting the bus, that's a lot better frame too, isn't it?
Yes.
By putting this under the train, you'll see where it started. It would hit the step right here. In other words, when it set it down, you couldn't, because that right there, the wheel was right there. And if you look at the train, you'll see it. It was cut. I cut all this off of the front, and we had to extend it out about that far.
By about a foot or so.
Yeah, to keep the front wheels from hitting the steps. So that worked out pretty good, really. And we took the front of the school bus off right there, because I wanted to save all of that stuff, and put back on.
Right.
Here it is, showing all that. There's the front end. See where I cut the front of the train off?
Right.
And then we put it up on there. That's what I was doing there. I was trying to do some modifications so this thing would actually fit on there. And we finally got it on there. And that's when they're starting to install it on the school bus frame. See, so that's when all the fun started. That's where we got. That's when that's Eddie Johnson there. That's when he came into the pay. He was a friend of your dad, and he was just over here that day helping us kind of figure out how much we had to do, what we had to do, and when. We just did it day by day. Leveled it up this way until we got to where we felt like we needed to be. I think that's Eddie there too.
Yep.
So you can see it starting to come back down. Now this framework and all here was what was already under there that
The old truck, the
other,
farm truck.
yeah, the other guys did. And I just took advantage of that. As you can see there, it's coming back down. We had 6106 on the train before we even started this, because that is when we bought it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's see. So there it is. We got all that piece back on, and I was just test driving it around. You know, that looks pretty good like it is.
Yep.
And here's when we had it at your house, starting to really do the work. They had a friend of ours, Joe Marchese, was in construction work, putting up these sheet metal buildings or whatever you want to call them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the fenders came into the picture. As you can see, that's nothing but a beam out of one of them old houses that he constructed, and we just reversed it, yeah, and put that on so when the wheels turned, they wouldn't hit nothing. And you can see the condition it was in here. It was rusted pretty bad. You could grab that and probably break it off with your hands. And we played with it. See that? Oh, she was really in bad shape. I don't know who these guys are. Gosh, boy, they was young. And here you can see some of the body rust that was on it. So just sandblasted and sanded, and that was our dog, Mama. Starting to come together pretty good, really. See it there. And let's see, we kept playing around, and we made these. Shane donated these panels, as you know. We made these panels to cover up the wheels. And
if I remember right, I gave you some of my catalogs to look through, and you chose the paint scheme from there.
Oh yeah, which I've always wanted. This Santa Fe has always been my favorite since I was a little boy. And you got these pictures too.
Mm-hmm.
Those are some good pictures. Now I got another picture on the computer you might want. I got this on there, and it actually shows the dimensions of this thing. If you're interested in that,
I'm sure I'll have people who are interested in that.
this is not much to talk about, but that's how this thing really came about. And I didn't have any idea it would turn into something that we could drive down the road. Had no idea that would ever happen. Ain't no way. But when we got it put at this stage here, hey, this thing's pretty neat, you know. So then sanding and doing all this and painting and all that, it turned out to be a pretty good little project. People have enjoyed it, seeing it. And these are some of the proofs of the pudding, isn't it? Shows it in
like
the parade.
Reactions of the facial reactions.
Yeah.
See?
When people ride by it or meet somebody.
Yeah, be sure to show these pictures of
Yeah,
people.
people have asked if it's been in parades, and obviously it's been in parades
Man,
because we
there
got all
you
these
go,
pictures.
yeah.
But
And this one here was a benefit. That's a benefit, a fundraiser for that young boy there with cancer. And that was him there. That worked out really neat. Ryan for Austin.
I've got a few questions that I've seen in comments of the videos. People, I mean, this has power steering on it.
Does it? Yes.
Yeah, I figured it did. Whenever I've been driving it, it's never been that big of a deal to drive. I mean, it's street legal because it's got tag and all that stuff.
It's got insurance. It's got everything works. You know, the lights, the turn signals, the horn. It was inspected to be roadworthy, and the majority of the stuff that's on the bus you can see is on the train.
Right.
The parking lights, tail lights, it's all bus stuff. So.
Someone asked. I mean, I don't think either of us have been pulled over in it, but I think Uncle Lee was pulled over in it, wasn't he?
Yeah, Lee was actually pulled over. He had taken the train to go to take it to the church he attends, he went to there, and they had it for Christmas, and he was going to bring it back home because they were going to do a photo shot the next day or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was going to leave it at your uncle's place, Wiley's, and he was going over to Viaduct, and the city policeman pulled him over, and it's just strange vehicle to
it
see
was
on
just
the road.
something.
Yeah.
It was like we were talking earlier. It was more of a curiosity thing than the hey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Lee was coming down the hill of the Viaduct, and Lee couldn't pull over. So he said, well, I'm just close to Wiley's. I'll just drive on to Wiley's, and that's where I'm going to leave it anyway. And the cop thought he was trying to get away from him. 40 miles an hour. Trying to outrun me. So anyway, the policeman had, I guess he got on the radio and said, this guy that's driving this train won't pull over or something. I don't know the conversation. But by the time Lee had got in there were, I think, 2 or 3 city police cars and 2 deputies, county deputies, with blue lights flashing.
I would probably I'd go investigate it too. With like, what's going on over there?
What is he talking about? The guy in the train won't pull over. So anyway, it got to be a kind of a funny thing. Said while he was there and they saw that it was legal, everything was legal on it. It turned out to be a fun thing.
Yeah.
And the sheriff's deputies and all said, "Do you mind if we go and look at it?" Get on. So, but now that's the story about this train. So, like I said, I get them turned around and mixed up, and about the beginning of this thing.
Mm-hmm. Well,
basically.
I told Mama earlier, you would not believe the amount of people who are interested in knowing this.
Really?
That I've seen through the channel.
Let's see if any of that's any good. What do you want to add about it?
I don't know that I want to add anything. I think it's pretty well covered. I thought
Well,
you
you add that part
I thought
about
you were crazy. That's what I thought.
Well,
absolutely.
And
crazy.
then your dad come home one day. He had gone to work, and he had come home one day with the train lights. He had got some train lights from down there where somebody was working. They were tearing the railroads out, and they took signs they were going to scrap them. And Paul brought them home. We got them where they all flashed.
Right.
Got that out there. So that's when train stuff started coming together. So that's where it stays. And people still today ask me, have you still got the train? Yeah. Had it in Rankin about a month ago. This, that, and that. So, well, I sure do like to see that thing on Christmas when you decorate it. So this year was something different. I don't know if we got a picture of it with Santa Claus in it or not, and the reindeer.
I think I managed to get one.
Did you? With the reindeer out front?
I think so. I think I got one.
Good. We do something every year different.
So that was the train. It's always fun to talk about the train to just anyone in general, but it's nice to finally talk or show it to a group of people who really can appreciate it for a train rather than a float ornament or some sort of decoration for our front yard.
That's right. And it is always fun to talk about the train, and it's a pleasure for me to talk about it because, hey, it's sitting in the backyard under the pole barn right now. Hopefully, some other time, Clay will invite me to share more information with you. I'd love to tell you about some of the things that I've experienced talking to people about the train. And maybe somebody out there wants to build a train, give me a shout. I'll give you some do's and don'ts. And it's starting up looking for a caboose and ending up with an engine. Quite a trip. Believe me, I've enjoyed it, Clay.
So once again, thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't, think about subscribing, maybe like the video. Thank you all for the support I've seen. Has been great. Thank you for helping me reach 100 subscribers, and thank you for stopping by the SEL tonight, guys. You got anything else you want to say?
No, just appreciate everybody out there supporting Clay, because he loves this to death, and we kind of like to support him. We like to go to the train shows with him. So see you again, I hope.